Here we go. It's the DC Sports Huddle. I'm Dave Johnson with Rob Woodfork, George Wallace, Dave Preston. We've reached the bye week. Some would argue we've already reached it a couple of weeks ago, but that's just another bad Washington football team joke, and we don't need to add to that. But let's talk about where this Washington football team is. I'll open up before we get into this discussion, and we'll start with you, Dave Preston. But a couple things stood out for me from the post-game press conference on Sunday. Ron Rivera talking about futility does not end overnight. And boy, do we know that here in D.C. and talking about sometimes it takes 3 to 5 years. And not that's an unreasonable statement, but it was a little bit sobering to hear. And also when he was asked how he would describe the month of October, he used the term chaotic and seemed to imply that, yeah, they were aware of all the outside noise that goes around the Washington football team and that staying focused is not always the easiest thing to stay focused on football. So again, this team does not feel like a team that is going forward, but a team that's stuck in a cul-de-sac. Dave Preston, your take.
I think the team is they're a mess right now. 2-6, they've lost 4 straight games. You look at an offense that is, we did not expect this offense to be the calling card of this team. But if you look at the last 3 games, they've averaged 11 points per contest. They've misfired on third down again. And they had, I think, 6 trips inside the 30-yard line this past week, came up with absolutely 0 points. You can't do that. You can't go on the road and feel as though you have to go for it on 4th and short from their 21. You need to get those early points on the road. That changed the entire vibe of the game. This is a team that is a last place team. That's how this feels more like the team of 2 years ago as far as execution than on last year's team that got hot thanks to playing a bunch of backup quarterbacks. You can replace the quarterback, you can replace the kicker, but this 53-man roster is one that can't get off the field on third down, that has issues moving the chains. So this team is, Coach Ron Rivera said that it takes 3 to 5 years to build a culture. Well, it definitely doesn't take 1.5 years to build a culture because the culture right now is not darn good.
No, and George, this and not to make light of a bad situation, but this is almost straying into the comical lane when you have a field goal kicker named Blewett who has 3 blocked field goals in 2 weeks. I know that's low-hanging fruit and it's a cheap joke, but that's all of a sudden it almost disbelief. You're like, wait a minute, what else is going to happen with this team?
But he is 100% when the ball gets past the line of scrimmage untouched.
All right. Well, we'll make it. George, duly noted. Dave Preston went to law school, so I knew there had to be.
There you go. Yeah, no, look, I mean, this is, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And Ron, he doesn't have 3 to 5 years. When have you seen that patience with this owner? I mean, it's just not going to happen. I don't think, the franchise quarterback is a thing. I mean, it came out this morning that Mitch Trubisky was this close to coming to DC from Buffalo. And they just somehow it just didn't get done at the last minute. So they are still looking for that franchise quarterback. And look, you have a lot of injuries on the offensive side. Yes, we get that. But let's be honest, folks, if Logan Thomas gets back, okay, and Brandon Sheriff, yes, and Sam Cosmi, okay, but they still weren't lights out when those guys were in the lineup. So, this is a 2-6 team heading to who knows where. And Taylor Heineke is still going to be the quarterback when they return from the bye. So to me, that tells me something that he believes nothing in Kyle Allen, even after everything he has told us, because Heineke's just not getting it done. I know he's not the only reason, but, again, like I said last week, just for some sort of spark to change things up. He's a backup quarterback. He's had 8 weeks now, or 7 weeks now starting. People are going to start to figure you out now, game plan for you. When you come off the bench, as we all know, a backup quarterback 1-2 weeks in, okay, there's nothing really on you, and you can kind of and perform that way. There's no really tape on you. But now you're kind of getting to the tendencies. You see what his tendencies are, and teams are preparing for it. So, Tampa right after the bye, you've got the Seahawks coming up, and then you got the NFC East, the Raiders. So it's just not going to get better anytime soon, I don't think. And I don't know where this team goes from here. I really don't until you find that franchise quarterback. And for Ron Rivera, you better hope it comes this offseason, because you can't afford. He's not going to live through another season, I don't think, like this one next year. I just don't see Dan having the patience. When have we ever seen that? So that's just how
it needs, but he needs to have patience, because Ron Rivera is the bit of sanity that his team desperately needs. So the bottom line is regardless of how this season ends up, it's no time to even think about changing coaches. Ron Rivera should remain the coach. Tanya Snyder should remain the president. Daniel Snyder should have his probation extended for 3 to 5 years, and then maybe they'll get out of this cul-de-sac of futility. Rob?
Yeah, I don't know that Tanya Snyder's fixing anything because she's proven that she's every bit as inept as her husband, but that's another topic for another day. To piggyback off of George and the quarterback situation, I just wrote a column on WTOP.com about this, and basically this Mitch Trubisky thing almost announces to us that Ron Rivera has no idea what he's doing with the quarterback position. And let's just say, just for the sake of argument, you give up maybe a 5th round pick for, or late round conditional round pick for a guy who's a backup quarterback to an established veteran right now, then you will have spent at least 2 picks on guys who probably don't touch the field, because they sent a 5th round pick to Carolina for Kyle Allen, and he won't even touch the field right now. So for a guy who doesn't want to overspend for a franchise quarterback, he's sending draft picks elsewhere to get guys who are 2nd and 3rd on the depth chart at that position. So it's just, he talks about the 3 to 5 years to establish a culture, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. The problem with where Washington is, though, is they do not have an identity. And it shouldn't take you 3 to 5 years to have an identity. And part of the problem is, if you have a franchise quarterback, it's easier for you to forge an identity. So I'm not saying that you necessarily have to have that guy like today, but you better have some sort of plan to find the guy, and you better do something that's better than what he's doing now. And that is just waiting around for some Dak Prescott to be available in the 2nd or 3rd or 4th round. And this franchise, as I alluded to in the column, this franchise doesn't really value guys that they take that late in the draft, because otherwise Kirk Cousins would still be here. And I'm not saying Kirk Cousins is any great shakes, but you have to, when you find that diamond in the rough, you have to be able to identify that you have found a diamond in the rough and operate accordingly. We haven't seen this organization do that.
And
they thought the identity, by the way, the identity was supposed to be the defense this year, right?
Right. And that's the thing. It's like that was right. And they're the 6th worst defense in the league for reasons that are still beyond my comprehension. So, that's the thing. If you're going to hang your identity on, a certain side of the ball, then, you need to at least have a face of that side of the ball who is like the guy. And I think on defense, it was kind of supposed to be Chase Young. And, he hasn't really lived up to the expectations, which is something that we haven't really been talking about here locally. I don't know if it's because he's a local kid or because, we just like the guy, but, that's been sort of the underreported aspect of that defense, is that Chase Young should be the guy who's like grabbing people by the face mask and making stuff happen. We haven't seen that from him or the unit.
And that's why you have literally fans yawning, because you have a situation where, who do they look to? There is no identity, because it's not happening on defense. There's not a Chase Young they can look to, like, the Ravens fans years ago looked to Ray Lewis or whatever. You could have an identity on one side of the ball, and then on the other side of the ball, it looks completely lost as there's not a franchise quarterback, which Ron Rivera admitted in the same statement when he was talking about improving the culture, that one of the caveats, it helps a lot to have a franchise quarterback to establish that culture. Dave Preston?
If only his franchise quarterbacks in Carolina were available.
Well, again,
he's not.
We all admit he was right. We should have taken Cam Newton, or no. I'll raise a hand. At this point,
I will say this, and I apologize if there's they're cutting the grass outside. I don't know if it's coming into the mic or not, but that's the thing with Cam Newton, is that he at least gives you some sort of identity. I don't know to what level he would play, but he certainly gives you somebody that you can rally around on that side of the ball, which is something that they do not have right now.
Dave?
What I think is amazing is how the whole Mitch Trubisky thing, it's like, oh my goodness, we're almost going to trade for Mitch Trubisky. Have you not seen his body of work since he came into the league? Why would you want Mitch Trubisky in the first place? It's, there are different articles here and there treating that like it's this silver bullet that is going to all of a sudden ease all of the ills of this franchise, of this offense. That's not going to happen. And I think this is unfortunately, Ron Rivera said it a couple of weeks ago. He admitted that perhaps they making the playoffs last year, going 7-9, made everyone think that they were a year ahead of schedule. Whereas if they had won 5 games last year, 7 games this year, 9 games next year, we would have had an even ascent. But, unfortunately you can't choreograph the results on the field and whose quarterbacks are injured and how much of a hot mess your division is in any given year. This team heading into the season, gentlemen, I thought that this team might be better than last year's team, but might not have as good a record just because of how everyone else is getting better as well. But this team has taken steps back on both sides of the football. And coming out of the bye week, I'm going to be very concerned to see how Chase Roulier how an offensive line without Chase Roulier works, because he's been quietly very underrated the last couple of years. You don't hear his name, and when you're a center, when you're an offensive lineman, that's exactly what you want to hear. Nothing, no penalties, no sacks, no blown assignments. He's gone. The center's the linchpin of an offensive line, and they have 8 weeks of backups to try and patch things up there. So moving forward, it's not as though we don't have enough to worry about, but that's a concern I have moving forward.
Look, and he said real quick, he talks about 7-9. Okay, last year you shouldn't have won maybe too much, but look, they were still 7-9. I mean, it's not like they were 10-6. So, okay, you're 7-9. You should take the next step this year, whether that's, playoffs or not last year. You're not going to finish 7-9 this year, or 7-10, or 4-3-5, whatever Dave likes to say. I made ties, but you know what I mean? I mean, so it's like, you still would like to see them take that next step. And injuries, fine, but they've had games this year. We talked about the schedule, but they have had opportunities to win games. And if you are heading in the right direction and going to take that next step, you don't throw 2 interceptions at the goal line. You don't go 0 for 6 inside the 30. It's just those little things that you'd like to see them, that there's no excuse for them not to be making, regardless of last year's record, which still was under 500. Yes, of course you make the playoffs. It's great, but you still were 7-9. So you want to see maybe a 500 this year, a little over 500, even if you don't make the playoffs because of how bad last year's division was. But you'd like to see progress, and we're not seeing it.
Also, I didn't hear anybody sort of overrate them from a 1-loss scenario. I know that a lot of people thought very highly of the defense, almost to a, but I didn't hear anybody. I think, as a matter of fact, Dave Johnson, I think you had the most, the sunniest prediction for them at 10-7. I think you had them, but
yeah, but I was drunk at that point.
I
was drunk at that point, so don't allow me to do those predictions on weekends.
I said the ceiling was 10.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't hear anybody say more than 10 wins for this team. So to me, that's not outrageous. To me, that's not something that was like way out of bounds. So, Ron is almost sort of overstating how much people expect of them. I think people expected them to be competitive. They expected them to be somewhere near 500. But right now they are they are like they're 2 plays away from being winless at this point. So it's, to me, it's just like nobody was overrating you. Like, all we're asking you to do is just not suck. The bar is so low.
Well, and I was based on 2 things that obviously have not happened. It was this defense taking a step forward. Okay, the defense was like that last year. It improves. It becomes a defense that can keep you in the low 20s. And then if Ryan Fitzpatrick can cobble together some of his magic and you get enough to win games 27-24, maybe it can happen. Well, we don't even have Ryan Fitzpatrick to talk about. And the defense has been a problem really since we've never seen the defense of last year.
Gentlemen, I guess I'm going to jump. I'll come back hopefully to do an audible at the line of scrimmage. But one last thought about the Burgundy and Gold. I think what's frustrating about this year's team is that I think, with the exception of the game against the Bills, every game was winnable. There were moments in each game, even the double-digit defeats. There were windows of opportunity for this team to make that step, and they shrunk. It feels like especially during this stretch where they've lost now 4 straight, they've played worse in the second half. And you can't do that if you want to be competitive as a team in the NFL. And I expected more out of Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, and Scott Turner this season. I didn't expect them to be Don Coryell and Buddy Ryan and Vince Lombardi, but I expected more than what we've had over the last month, where they've gone from being 2-2 and kind of semi in the mix to being 2-6. And right now we're charting to see where they are in the draft order next year.
5 right now. 5.
So bottom line, can we agree it's not going to get better until you get the franchise or the long-term starting quarterback? And that then begs the question, will we even be having this discussion if we just kept Kirk Cousins? Wasn't a starter here in Washington?
And nobody wants to hear this, but I mean, he did 2 things. Number one, he was always healthy. They have yet to go a season without having to start at least 3 different quarterbacks since Kirk Cousins left. So, what's the old saying? Your best ability is availability, and Kirk Cousins plays every game. And I think the other thing was you kind of knew what you were getting with Kirk Cousins. Can you win a championship with him? I mean, if you have a really good defense and if you have a good ground game around him, I mean, maybe he can game manage his way to one. Certainly Mike Shanahan, who has championship pedigree, thought that he could win a championship with the guy. So, that's a debate for another day, but at a minimum, he gives you some sort of consistency at that position. So I'm going to stop short of saying that they should have kept him, but I think it's stupid to let go of a guy when you don't have another option waiting in the wings. They could do that in Green Bay. We could debate all day, as to whether or not you let go of a future Hall of Famer like an Aaron Rodgers, but they drafted a guy who was supposed to take over for Aaron Rodgers. So you understand the move if they do that. Washington hasn't had a guy, let alone have a guy and then another guy waiting in the wings. That's just something that doesn't happen here.
Well, they thought they did last year with Dwayne, or 2 years ago.
Right.
And
And that's the other thing. It's like, Ron Rivera keeps using that basically as an excuse for why he didn't address the position as soon as he came in. But the thing is, if you were never sold on him,
which he wasn't.
Right, which he wasn't. The guy that was the coach when Haskins was drafted wasn't. So if you're going into a situation where you're not sold on the quarterback, the least you do is get yourself a veteran who can compete for that starting job. And again, you guys keep laughing at me for the Cam Newton thing. That's the time to bring him in. I don't care that he's a former MVP, and if Dwayne Haskins can't take that competition, he shouldn't be your quarterback anyway. This was the same thing we said about RG3. If you're worried about a guy sitting behind you who has taken 100 picks after you, then you shouldn't be a starter in the NFL.
Believe me, I'm not laughing about you and the Cam Newton thing. Believe me, nobody should be laughing about that. And then you mentioned RG3. It struck me in the face this morning as I looked up on television. He's doing commentary. And
he's actually pretty good.
No, he is pretty good, but he wasn't
TV.
That long ago. He was the savior in this town, and we were. I remember at the Comcast Sports Net, we even had a Christmas song written to the tune of RG3 instead of "Old Christmas Tree." It was RG3. But anyway, but the point is, not that I'm trying to get on a Kirk Cousins bandwagon, but yes, you'd like to have a Mahomes or a Brady to go to the Super Bowl with, but just up the road in Baltimore, I don't think we're going to look back at Joe Flacco's career and say he was one of the greatest ever. But that was a Super Bowl. So I mean.
And also, Dave Preston actually alluded to this when he was talking about Mitchell Trubisky. Why does everybody think? Because 2 words, Ryan Tannehill. Sometimes a guy gets a second opportunity elsewhere. It ends up being a better fit. There's better surroundings. There's, whatever the case may be. Sometimes just a change of scenery is enough for a guy to get, to get right. And maybe Trubisky is one of those guys. Who knows? But it's just really hard to see somebody, seeing Washington get the best out of somebody who failed elsewhere, because it's usually the other way around.
Never happens. Right.
All right. Let's go to, I guess, Dave Preston likes it, the audible at the line as he sits down. I believe my audible at the line should be the team that you're looking forward to beyond Washington, or the team to watch out for, maybe the biggest disappointment, or maybe something else. Dave, will let you get collected. George Wallace, will start with you.
Let's go. Can we switch? Can I go down a level to college?
You can go anywhere. This is audible.
All right. Let's talk.
You can go indoor lacrosse if you want.
No, that I missed those practices. Let's go. Let's see if Maryland can actually pull off this upset against Penn State this week. Look, Penn State's not world beaters like they have been in the past. Maryland gets by Indiana. They tried to lose it, but now, as I like the way Mike Loxley said, okay, now you can start talking about being bowl eligible because you are at number 5. And we've seen the big games in College Park. We've seen it come up to, on the short end. Penn State's got a lot of people here this weekend, but let's see if Maryland can take that next step, beat a ranked opponent in College Park that's going to have a good support good support in the stands, and get to that 6th win, because you got Michigan State after that, who I didn't think was that good, but they proved it, are starting to prove it anyway. And then you get Michigan and then Rutgers. You don't want it to come down like it has to having to win a game at the end of the year against Rutgers, which, hey, let's face it, it probably will. But let's see if they can step up, take that next step against Penn State this week, a team it comes in at 5-3 as well. And maybe, surprise some people here in College Park.
There's a sentence, having to win a game against Rutgers. Let me write that down. All right, Dave Preston, you're at the line.
I'm looking forward to the college basketball season, men and women, tipping off next Tuesday. We've got a slew of pieces coming your way on WTOP.com. We start by profiling Maryland women, who are ranked 4th in the preseason by the writers. They're ranked 5th in the coaches. They have all 5 starters coming back. This is perhaps their best team since the national championship squad back in 2006 that returned all 5 starters. Started that season number 1, finished, they wound up getting bounced early in the NCAA tournament. So this is going to be an exciting winter for them, but just the other schools as well. George Mason has reason for optimism under first-year head coach Kim English. Jamie and Christian is in year 3 at George Washington. I had a chance to chat with
Dave?
I don't know what happened there.
All right. Well, the transcripts are with Dave Preston will be available in our gift shop. Rob, you're next. Audible.
All right. So for me, I'm sticking with the NFL. I'm looking up the road at the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to have a nice ending to the season. And if you look at what they've done since Lamar Jackson has taken over as the starting quarterback there, it just seems to me that he is, they have a tendency to finish out seasons pretty strong for all intents and purposes. So I'm really excited about seeing what that team is going to do. And that's a wide open division right now. The Cincinnati Bengals, I don't know if they're for real. The Cleveland Browns seem like they're kind of imploding a little bit at this point. So I'm very interested to see if that ends up being a team that makes a deep run. And bear in mind, the Baltimore Ravens are a team, they've only ever won a Super Bowl as a wild card. So if they end up having to go that route, then, maybe that's the preferred method for them.
They know the route map. And I'll just end with the Wizards real quick. This team is for real. I'm not saying it's going to be a 50-win team, but I think about the way it lost on Monday night in Atlanta. It actually shot better from the field. It was a very good Atlanta team. And you're okay losing when it just comes down to, okay, on that night on the road, the better team on that particular night actually won, and they won at the free throw line. So this Wizards team under Wes Unseld Jr. is coming together quicker than I think most thought. I think quicker than Wes Unseld Jr. thought. It's also an advertisement that why young assistants, not just named Wes Unseld Jr., should get an opportunity to be a head coach and shouldn't recycle head coaches in the NBA. And by the way, indoor lacrosse, keep an eye on the National Lacrosse League. Nick Sikiewicz is a friend of mine. He's the commissioner. That is a league on the rise. Just got to deal with ESPN. And yes, I do want the play-by-play job with the San Diego Seals. That's going to do it for Dave Preston and George Wallace, who were already.
Yeah, they just texted the Wi-Fi in the building sucks. So
yeah, apparently. Well, we'll have to get that fixed next week. Yeah. See, this is what happens when you hit the bye week 2 and 6. The Wi-Fi goes squirrel.
I work from home.
Rob Woodfork. I'm Dave Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Break.